Welcome, everyone. I'm Pat Gales, and I'm a member of the Friends of the Dighton Public Library, and we've been sponsoring candidates night for quite some time now. Before we begin, let's rise and say the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Tonight we have 4 candidates that are running for the open seat on the Selectmen's Board. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to introduce themselves to you. Then we'll open up the questioning and answer period. You can ask questions from the floor. Each candidate will answer each question, and they will just pass the mic to each other. Hopefully, you get some good information to make some good choices at the election on June 28th. And so we're going to begin. They're sitting in alphabetical order, and that's how we're going to start. Okay, first is Peter Karen.
Last time I think I got cut short. All right, thank you. My name is Peter Karen, and I want to thank the library, Friends of the Library, for putting this together this evening. I know it's a lot of work, and we just kind of assume that it's going to happen every year, but it's never quite sure. Dighton is a special place, and I want to keep it that way. That's why I'm running for selectman. I've served on the Town Finance Committee as chairman for 3 years. I've also served on the Zoning Board of Appeals for over 15 years, with 3 years of those as chairman. On these boards, I've listened, learned, and worked collaboratively. I've earned a reputation in fairness and treated people with respect. I stood up for residents by opposing proposals that would have a negative impact. I've been a consensus builder, working well with members of these boards and with other volunteers, staff, and the public. I'm ready to contribute on the Board of Selectmen. As a leader, I'll continue to listen and seek balance and sensible solutions. I'll work to ensure that Dighton remains a welcoming place where we can all afford to live and stay. I care deeply about supporting local businesses, great schools for our kids, and responding to citizens' concerns and preserving Dighton's beauty and historic character. I'll support wise zoning and planning tools and housing options for families and seniors who want to stay in their homes. I'll work to make sure Dighton gets its fair share from our state and federal partners. How am I doing? Oh, good. I moved to Dighton 35 years ago, and I'm married and have 3 boys who all go through the Dighton school system. And it's been a wonderful school system for my children, and hopefully it continues to be a wonderful school system for your children and your grandchildren. In addition to serving on the boards that I mentioned, I've also been a substitute teacher where I volunteered my time in refusing to take pay for it. I've also been a junior achievement instructor where we would go into classrooms and instruct your kids on junior achievement, which is something you might remember from back when you were kids. I've also been a scoutmaster and a Little League coach. As a matter of fact, as I stand here and I look throughout the room, I recognize some of the parents and grandparents now of some of the kids I used to coach. I love Dighton. It's a place that I would move to when I became a vice president for Marriott Corporation. I worked for the Marriott Corporation for 15 years as a general manager, as a regional supervisor, and as a VP. After I retired for 15 years at the Marriott Corporation, I started working for myself as a Pepperidge Farm distributor, where I owned several franchises and did distributorships for Pepperidge Farm. I've been, like I said, here for 35 years, and I continue to live here and hopefully retire here. So thank you very much for your time, and I wish all the other candidates good luck.
All right, thank you, Peter. Next is Ken Pacheco.
I want to thank Pat and the Friends of the Library for giving us an opportunity to speak and give our point of views and answer these. Hopefully something that most questions that you guys can pose. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ken Pacheco. I moved to Dighton about 30 years ago. We moved to 1860 North Street. I moved here with my wife for 46 years. We brought our 2 daughters from Berkeley over here. At the time, Berkeley was sending their students to the Dighton Public. second or so, because that we moved to Dighton, because we wanted my kids to go to school. My wife had graduated from the school. I have, like I mentioned, I have 2 daughters, and they've moved down, and they don't no longer live in Dighton. I did have a grandson a couple of years ago in the Dighton school system. They've given me, we've been blessed with 4 grandchildren. Thank you all very much. I was a probation officer for 35 years at the time of the court. I retired as the chief probation officer. And of course, I had a job. I was a supervisor for 19 years, and chief for the last 3 years of my before I retired. I had an opportunity to make some difficult decisions and choices at that time. When someone violates their probation, bring them back before the court. We make some very serious recommendations to the court. You may be taking their liberty away from them. Because of that experience, making those difficult decisions, I think I am qualified to be your selectman, because the selectmen do have to make difficult decisions. And I strongly believe that selectmen should be given their point of view on different items that come before the town. For example, these money items, school, other issues that come before the town. I feel strongly that the board of selectmen should be given the recommendation to the townspeople as to what the positions are. You may not necessarily agree with that recommendation, and you may vote against what they recommend. I think it's important that you understand the position of your selectmen before you. I've been on the zoning board for 17 years. When Peter left the zoning board, I became chairperson. I've been chairperson for a little over a year. I also belong to the housing board as well as the cemetery commission. And I recently joined the historical commission. I've been on that board for about 3 or 4 months. I've been a member of the Dighton Historical Society since I moved into town. My wife and I purchased an old house, and as a result of that, we got involved with the Dighton Historical Society. I've been involved, like I said, for 30 years, and I'm presently the treasurer of the Dighton Historical Society. My wife is the president of the Dighton Historical Society. And we just did a renovation a couple of years ago, and hopefully someone will come to the Principal Vegas Museum and see their tax dollars. I work on rehabilitating the house. I feel that we need to address the situation. We're overcrowded. Unfortunately, we're in a situation where we have to deal with it immediately. We should not have been in this position. I'm not going to put blame on anybody, but we need to look at what the problem was. Half a sentence.
Next we have Vicki Piazza.
Good evening, thanks to you and the library, President Library. Good evening, I'm Vicki Piazza, and I'm a friend of the Superintendent Board of Selectmen. While I'm originally from this area, I have lived all over the country. Returning to this area in 1999, and I did choose Dighton. I chose it to purchase my home and to eventually feed my children. I have 4 great for their child. Over the last 40 years, I've spent a great deal of my time volunteering in many municipalities in many different states, in areas of the country, gaining experiences and trainings, which I think is my Dighton. My training includes I was on a planning, zoning board, family and children committee, emergency preparation with USDS, with experiences including Mount St. Helens eruption and earthquakes. This type of experience shows you need to be prepared immediately. Don't get 3 days to go through off the breath. I also have experience with toxic waste sites, honorary wells, Superfund sites, meetings with companies, neighborhood groups, and other agencies. I led a neighborhood association that was similar in population and housing units to Dighton. I graduated from both leadership classes and public safety, which is actually police and fire combined, training into the practical experiences in classrooms. I served on a district school committee and also on the school finance committee. I attended Foothill College and San Jose State University. I I use a methodical thought process that comes from working and studying in the big technological center of the United States, participating in think tanks at Stanford and tech companies as well as focus groups in our community. Seeing the changes since I've been here, my concern was the balance of residential and commercial revenue. We need to encourage market and draw suitable businesses to guide to meet the needs of the community and to result in tax revenue. Right now, I'm serving on the Dighton Development and Industrial Commission as chair and on the Green Grants Committee. I suggested guidelines, design guidelines to Dighton for consideration, organize the annual campaign, and brought ideas to the Board of Selectmen and Public Department heads. Thank you very much.
All right, and our last speaker, our last candidate is Tim Rhines.
Good evening, my name is Timothy F. Rhines. At this time, I would like to thank the Friends of the Dighton Public Library for hosting tonight's forum, and also the other candidates who are also present, sitting to my left on the dais. I am running for the 2-year unexpired seat of the Board of Selectmen. Born 57 years ago in Dighton, my family's roots go back even further to over 100 years. I live at 316 Main Street. I am a 1979 graduate of Dighton, Rehoboth. And at the age of 17, while still in high school, I enlisted in the Massachusetts Army National Guard, the late enlistment program, attending drills on weekends once a month while still in high school. I served from 1978 to 1991, attaining the rank of sergeant. In 1987, I joined the Construction and General Labor's Local 876 in Taunton in 1987. I held the position of recording secretary and executive board member for over 10 years, from 1992 to 2002. My brother Kenneth and I had the pleasure of being the president and vice president, respectively, of the Babe Ruth program for 6 years. In 2010, I just decided to run for the position of Parks and Recreation Commission, having just been re-elected to another 3-year term. I have had the honor of serving as chairman the last 4 years. In 2010, the Community Preservation Commission was on the brink of extinction. I had the unenviable task of restoring this committee, of which was accomplished. I have had the honor of serving with my peers, continuing to keep that good faith in me to lead them in such a vital committee, and I thank those people for that. In late 2017, I was appointed to a 3-year position on the Zoning Board of Appeals, serving as an associate member. Now to the business at hand. I seek your vote because of the many different issues this town is being faced with. Number 1, addressing the overcrowding issue at the elementary school. And my question is, do we as a town need to pay for a feasibility study to see if we should break away from the regional school agreement? 2, public safety. Are our police and fire departments staffed properly? 3, the town just signed a community compact with the state of Massachusetts. This should open doors to more grant funding. And by the way, does the town have an experienced grant writer? If not, do we hire one? The town administrator. The position is a work in progress, which I've stated many times. Please remember that the position in question works for the Board of Selectmen and our townspeople. Utilize those strengths and continue to improve on any weaknesses that may come about. It is a collective of individuals who should work together to accomplish any and all goals set forth by the BOS. I can guarantee you this. I will be versed in any subject that comes through the door at 979 Somerset Avenue. Thank you very much. And there are a few other issues I will expound upon, hopefully, by the end of this forum. Again, my name is Timothy F. Rhines, and I appreciate your votes on June 28th.
All right, thanks to all of our candidates. Now we're going to open up the questions from you. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond to the same question, and then we'll ask a new question, okay? All right, questions in the back?
I'll lead it off. So I guess, Tim, you led into the topic there. What I'd like to know is what each of your candidates have for knowledge of the issues in the district between Dighton and Rehoboth, and what your understanding is of how regional districts work. We hear comments from many citizens in town about should we deregionalize, and I'd like to know if people really understand what the issue is and why we're in some situation we're in.
Okay, so you're looking for information on the regionalization?
Their knowledge and understanding of the school district.
Okay, okay. Does everyone have that question? All right, we're going to start with Peter. Microphone.
Should be on, Peter.
I guess I'm not really sure what the question is.
Not at all a trick question, but yeah, I'd like to know what, we've had other previous selectmen that served on committees, and then we have some that understand. I'd like to know what you guys understand of how regional school districts work, which Dighton is a part of.
Sure, okay, now I understand, thank you. As far as how the regional school system works, we have an agreement with the town of Rehoboth where we support one high school. That high school is paid for between the town of Dighton with a certain percentage and the town of Rehoboth with a certain percentage based on how many of the students go. K through 8 is both supported by the individual towns. So our K through 8 has one budget and our, well, it's a collectively budget, but we have no control over how Rehoboth spends their K through 8 funds, like they have no control over how we spend our K through 8 funds. But when it comes to the high school funds, it's a joint task. That's why we're faced with the situation where Dighton has funded our portion of taxes, without taxes for the high school, but Rehoboth has not. And that's why we're facing the Rehoboth is facing the 2.5 override to fund their portion of taxes. I mean, I don't know how much more I can explain it beyond that.
I'm just curious what each of you know.
Sure.
Yeah, I won't add to that because I think we all understand what it means to be regionalized. I'm in favor of staying regionalized if there are benefits to this town, as you probably know, Glenn, being on the school committee. Obviously, if they don't vote for the override, it's going to impact our school system. Our budget's going to be 1/12 of the level funding for fiscal year 2018, is my understanding. And we're going to have to get together. Thank you. We're going to have to get together and have what they call a 10 meeting between the two towns and try to come up with a budget that both towns agree on. And I think that's only, my understanding is it's only temporary. It's only going to be until December, but we really have to deal with a better budget. So if they don't vote for the override, I'm not a big fan of overrides, but I believe that they put themselves in this position. They need to vote for the override and need to prevent something like 84 teachers and staff from being laid off. I think we owe it to our children to make sure that they have proper rooms, proper teaching, proper everything else. And my daughters, like I said earlier, went to the school, didn't have problems at that time. But I think we can resolve it, but I'm in favor of staying regionalized. I'm not one of those advocating to check into the feasibility of breaking up. Thank you.
I lived in an area in the committees that I've been on in the finance. In the committees that I've been on, they had regionalization, and so the high school was a different region with different towns involved. The elementary was a different region with different in town, and it got tough there because we were up against Gano Prop 13, and we had to get very creative with budgeting and think of different kinds of solutions. Right now, it seems like it's at a point where they haven't clearly thought out different avenues to make it work as far as Rehoboth and Dighton and what needs to be done. I support the schools. obviously. I think lower classroom sizes is very important, and I've seen what can happen when you increase the classroom size. So it's just a matter of working together with Rehoboth to get the job done.
My understanding is that if, I'm not saying to de-regionalize, it's just a question on the table. I don't support it, I'm just putting that question out there. Excuse me, what I'd like to say in regards to that, if we were to de-regionalize, it would be my understanding that because of the amount of students that we have in the school system, the state reimbursement would be much different than we are as a regionalized school district. I don't really want to see that happen. I'm a graduate of the school myself. As Mr. Pacheco stated, you know, you're looking at 86 possible teachers and staff being laid off. Dighton, you know, Rehoboth has threatened this to this town for many years. We don't need to be set back and be held hostage by another community. It's just something that we need to look at. But then again, I believe that if we were to de-regionalize, the amount of state reimbursements that we would receive would be much less than what we would be receiving now.
Okay, thank you. Could you pass the microphone? And Ken, you're going to start this time? Okay, another question.
Do I come up with a question?
No.
I don't know what the question.
Mr. Pacheco?
Okay, I'd like to ask the candidates what they think the biggest issue is the town faces and how you would rectify it.
What's the biggest issue the town faces and how they would rectify it? Okay, all right. Go ahead, Ken Pacheco.
Yes. So I think one of the, well, we just discussed the school. I think that's probably the immediate important issue that we need to face. But second to that is revenue, getting revenue. That's why the main issue is collecting revenue, and that's why I'm in favor of changing putting a medical overlay in from 220 William Street to the town line so that we can get revenue from that. We get 3% in sales tax, and we get additional money in taxes for the commercial building. It's a good way for us to get a source of money. I've been to these candidate nights many times. Everybody talks about getting business. This is one good example of an opportunity for this town to bring some business in. Be on the ground floor of this. There's a lot of towns that have rejected this. We should not be one of them. This town voted to legalize marijuana, and I think we ought to follow through with that. The state government, I'm on the Cannabis Task Force Committee, now called the Advisory Board, and the state laws are very strict when it comes to marijuana. The Board of Health is even making things a little stricter in the sense that the distance from a daycare center is further than what the state requires. So I'm strongly in favor of that and bringing revenue in. But that's just one good example of bringing revenue in. But the number one issue is the schools. So.
As I stated earlier, I'm on the Development Industrial Commission, and the reason I chose that commission was because we had at one point 40% commercial industrial, you know, Princess House, the factory, and we're down to under 3%. We need commercial revenue brought to this town. Our taxes will increase irregardless, but we need to have a buffer there. I'd like to see obviously the factory build. Princess House, or Interplast as it's known now, is viable space, yet they're not leasing out to anybody. As you know, I campaigned really hard for the medical marijuana overlay district because Princess House or Interplast refused to have it where we had placed it originally. We chose the plaza, you know, the planning department, et cetera, and the Board of Selectmen were supportive of it. However, obviously at town meeting it was a close vote, but it was denied. That's one source. They also get a community hosting agreement can be upwards of 100 to 150,000. There's several different marijuana that do the medical marijuana that want to come into this town when we have the medical overlay finally secured and in place. We've had tours of the factory for all kinds of different things, and for one reason or another, the people chose not to use it. Either it was the owners of the factory and or the people. I feel like for startup businesses, it could be utilized. Thank you very much.
Candidates, please make sure that you hold the mic up high enough so that it can make it louder for everyone to hear.
As Mr. Pacheco stated, I believe that the situation right now is the schools. You know, the schools are busting at the seams, and that's in regards to the growth of the town itself. You know, we've gone, and I've seen it go from literally 4,000 people in the mid-'70s to over 8,200. So we're busting at the seams. What we need to do is to try to control the growth of housing starts in the town and crack down on some of these contractors to make sure that, you know, everything's up to code. Because if you look at things that the average home, if you build a 2 or 3 bedroom, you're talking 2.5 kids in the school system. So what we need to do is look at the amount of housing starts we have, multiply that by 2.5 to figure out what could possibly be put into the elementary school or the middle school or the high school. Secondly, business. I just want to give you a quick story. I was told by a gentleman in town that the reason why there are not a lot of businesses in this town is you look at the map. And the map for the zone commercial business is owned by private people. You just cannot go to a private homeowner and say, or property owner and say, hey, look, you're going to put a Walgreens at, 1,000 Somerset Avenue. That's not going to happen. So we need to look at that situation. Thirdly, if we can expand the sewer line and have the sewer department get some funds together to possibly expand the sewer line down 138 into different areas in town, they may bring business into the town itself. And in regards to the infrastructure, the question is that can our infrastructure support the growth that this town has? And I specifically state our water system in this town. Our water system is run by wells. They've built numerous homes in the south end of Dighton. Has the building department, along with the Board of Selectmen and other boards in this town, got together with the necessary departments to look to say that can our water system take care of the future growth of the town and the town's needs?
Thank you. Mr. Pacheco, I, like the other candidates, feel that the biggest portion of our budget goes to schools. And then because it goes to schools, it always seems to be the #1 issue. And I agree that it is the #1 issue facing us now. I don't want to go back to the past and place blame as to why we are where we are today, but the schools are apparently, according to the studies that have been done, and everybody that you talk to, are too small. And it is us as a town, the parents that own these houses, whether you're a parent or not, the people that pay taxes, we have an obligation to fund our schools. Now, the best way to fund those schools would be a combination of how it's done now between property taxes as well as what little we get from excise tax. But obviously the easiest solution would be to bring more business into town. I'm not quite sure as to, we have 2 great parcels of land between 44 and 138 that brings numerous traffic through town, and I'd like to see both of those developed with the neighborhoods in mind. That would increase our tax base with commercial income. I don't think the sole burden should be placed on just the property owners that exist here in town now, because too many times it would raise the taxes too much and force people out of their homes. Other than the schools in the system that's in place, it's a #1 school system if you talk to numerous people, and it's our obligation to keep it that way. So I would say the #1 issue facing the town is the school system, whether it be the size or in our case, the regional district with Rehoboth.
Did you you pass the mic to Vicki, she'll answer first on the next question. Okay. Bob?
Good evening. I have a question. The issue has been raised here by a couple of the candidates regarding the schools and regarding infrastructure, et cetera. It just seems to me, the school, the elementary school specifically, we didn't arrive at this problem overnight. Okay, and I think there's an incredible lack of leadership that got us where we are. The question is, what are you going to do strategically plan for the town 5, 10, 15 years down the road? And I understand 15 years down the road is a long time, but what are we going to do to look at those problems that are 5 and 10 years away and start acting on them now?
So you're looking for some long-range planning, strategic planning?
Correct, and the follow-throughs of how you would react to, starting to deal with those issues you think are on the horizon today.
Okay. All right, Vicki?
Well, it all goes back to the bigger picture of financing. And where I came from, the financial model that they use, sorry. Yeah, stay over here. Anyway, the financial model they use, they didn't do anything unless they could project the cost over the lifespan of what it was they wanted to spend the money on. So if they wanted to buy a car, they took it, the aspect of the cost of it wasn't the actual vehicle, it was the vehicle plus 10 years, whatever the lifespan would be. And also, if you did a park, so going back to the schools, the principle applied. So you get into a different mode of thinking when you're doing your budget, rather than just looking at the immediate cost, look at the cost of maintaining it and the growth, etc. And it's a different mindset and a different way to do business. Obviously, to support everything that we need to raise revenue through commercial development in this town, rather than expecting the homeowners to continually pay more taxes. I think that's all I have to say.
I think that one of the things that we need to utilize in this town is to look at our capital outlay expenses. We have a committee that's been formed that is looking at our long-range needs in that. I think that's one thing that we should look at. Also, we should look at our master plan. We just spent $60,000 to $80,000 to redo a master plan that had not been done in over 30 years. We should follow the guidelines of the master plan and what it's telling us. Thirdly, I just want to say this, municipal employees pay. And this is coming from an old union man. We have to look at things right now coming up. We are going to have an abundance of individuals who work in town who will be retiring. Those are monies that we're going to have to pay forward for the retirement as such and the medical insurance. But in regards to that, there should be some type of a wage study done to see what's going to happen when those people retire that will be coming into these positions as, I'll just give an example, town clerk, town treasurer, to see if what type of degrees that they have and what that range pays for that position. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to come out the street, you're going to make $80,000 as being made right now. You should not. You should be set at a certain level when you start that position, and then you work your way up. That's all I have to add at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure how we got to the situation that we're in today. As much as I've been here for 35 years and my children went through the school system, they, let me back up for a second. For close to 17 years, I was on the Zoning Board of Appeals. 3 years of those were as chairman, when we would, part of our task as Zoning Board of Appeals was to deal with the 40Bs that came into town. And we would notify the school system like we would every other department to let them know that we were going to be conducting meetings on these 40Bs that were coming into town. And these 40Bs probably brought an average of 100 to 150 kids, not quite sure. Anyway, the school department would show up for the first meeting, and it was always the one and only meeting they came in to say that they objected to the 40B that was going to be built, and that was the only thing we ever heard from them. But myself, Ken as well, and Mr. Pacheco, when you served on the board, the first few months of putting together these meetings, we would emphasize to the school department that, look, we're going to be bringing 100 some odd kids coming in 3 to 5 years from now. Make sure you are ready. We would do the same thing with the police department, the fire department, and whatever else that we had to in town. And nothing ever seemed to happen. I'm not quite sure what went wrong, but we're faced with the situation today where this elementary school, they are now asking for approximately six, I think, trailers to be added on. To me, that's a poor excuse for planning, that we waited till the last minute and decided that we're going to be building these temporary structures at a cost of $1.1 million, when they've known for years that these schools were going to be too small to accommodate the students that were coming in.
Thank you.
I swear you changed that thing.
Just to continue with that, I feel the biggest issue right now is the growth of the town and the building in the town. I've been on the Zoning Board of Appeals, like Peter said. I've been on it for 17 years. We've dealt with 7 40Bs, 4 are active right now, 1 is still in litigation, 1 is disappeared, and 1 is was defeated by litigation. So we have all these 40Bs coming in, which increases our number of students that we have here. You can't stop 40Bs. I mean, you can get the input from the school committee and the school department and other departments prior to you actually getting the application for the hearing. Right now, we have a 40B Strawberry Fields that's coming before us. This came before the planning board. They were going to put 43 houses in, and now and that was denied. They had very legitimate reasons for denying it, but now they're coming in with 92 houses. And now this is something that the zoning board and this town is going to have to deal with. It's right now before the selectmen. They're asking inputs from other departments, school and whatever. They have, prior to the ZBA getting the application, the school can say, as well as the zoning board and other boards, the planning board can give reasons why they don't think it's appropriate. But once it gets to the zoning board, we cannot take into consideration the number of students that's going to come in, how it's going to impact the ambulances and police department and all that kind of stuff. What we can do is control the growth. We had the one 40B that I was the chairperson of, Pines. They came in with 66 houses. I was able to get it down to 45 houses. It was then sold to another company, and that went down to 33 houses, so it was half the houses. Now, they went from a joint septic system for the 45 houses to individual septic systems, so they had to cut it down anyway. But you try to control growth. So my point is, I think that the growth in town we have to watch it carefully. You have people saying we're going to stop the growth. We're not going to stop the growth. The housing production plan is coming up in October, I believe, and that needs to be worked on so that we can deal with affordable housing. Keep it close.
Yes?
Hi there, Jessica Hershey from Tremont Street. I have 2 boys, one in elementary school and one in middle school. And I appreciate the question about long-term plan. As you know, at the town meeting last week, there was a great discussion that was started about adding modular units for the school for the space. That isn't supported by the financial committee, at this point, and so that is being reevaluated. So 2-part question. Do any of the candidates plan to be at the school committee meeting tomorrow night so that you can hear more about what some of the potential plans are? And second of all, instead of a long-term plan, we need a plan for September. And so with the election taking place at the end of this month, you will have 2 months before school starts. So I'd like to know, if you are not in support of the modular units, what are your recommendations for the start of this school year?
So you want to know if they're going to the meeting tomorrow night, and if they're in support of the modular units or not. If not, what are their plans? Okay, all right.
Mrs. Hershey, that's a great answer. You know, as we all sat here last Wednesday night and we listened to 90 minutes of debate in regards to that topic, I listened to the superintendent of schools, and that man just took us around in circles. He made absolutely zero sense. The school committee was not on board with the superintendent or their building department up there. We couldn't get an idea of, are we renting? Are we leasing? Are we renting to lease? Are we renting to own? I've heard different things that have been said, that we should move the pre-K out of the high school, bring them here, possibly move the 8th grade to the high school, which would make more room, and we can move 4th grade possibly next door. The question is that I don't know what we're going to do, because we're in such a time crunch that if Rehoboth doesn't decide, as Mr. Pacheco said, to vote on a budget, then we're going to have a TED meeting, and we could be looking at possibly working with 1/12 of the monies in the district per month to be utilized. I don't want to see 86 teachers or 86 personnel laid off at all. But right now, unfortunately, we were in a reactive position. We should have been proactive a long time ago. Because right now it stands that if we were to get on the list with the MSBA, it would take us anywhere between 1 to 7 years in order to possibly be approved. You take Westport, for example. $200 million high school being built, they're getting a 90% reimbursement, and that's because of the amount of monies. The average median income in town is very low in the town of Westport. So they get a different rate of reimbursement from the state of Massachusetts. Somerset only got a small amount of monies to build their new high school because of their average median income. Dighton right now, if we were to get on the list, we'd be lucky we received anywhere near 50%. So honestly, I don't really know what that answer is going to be come September. We need to do something.
Are you going to the meeting on Tuesday?
I'm sorry, yes, I will be at the meeting. I will be present.
Yes, I am going to that meeting, and I will be a concerned citizen and taxpayer just like everybody else who's going to be at that meeting. My answers for the problems come September is I would be in favor of those trailers, not as a long-term solution, as just a Band-Aid. And I want to say that I probably would have been fired from my job if I had ever let ourselves get into that kind of a situation that we're going to invest $1.1 million and just get 6 trailers out of it. That money could have been used to start a decent size addition to the elementary school. But in addition to the elementary school and these trailers, I hope that the school committee and along with the administration is thinking long-term as far as these students are going to go from the elementary school to the middle school. And again, we're going to have to be faced with a situation where the middle school is not going to be the proper size. So to invest $1.1 million for a Band-Aid, I'm opposed to spending that kind of money, but there is no other way that I see that we can meet the goals of September as explained by the school committee, I'm sorry, not the school committee, the school administration, and not have something in place.
Yes, I'm going to be at the meeting tomorrow night. I have an historical commission meeting tomorrow night. I've already notified them that I won't be attending that meeting. Obviously, this is more important. Hopefully, we're going to get some information from the meeting tomorrow night. I'm not totally convinced that we need 6 trailers. Hopefully, it's half. It's my understanding that they're hiring 3 new teachers, so that would need 3 more rooms. If we keep pre-K at the high school, we won't have to worry about finding room for them over here. So I'm hoping that we only need 3. I am concerned if we're going to take the money out of the stabilization fund. This is a fund that, right now we got bonds out for our police station. If we take money out of there, our bond rating is going to change. It's going to change to the worst, and it's going to impact our rating and our taxes. So I am a little concerned about taking money out of the stabilization fund. I do think we need to deal with the issue immediately. It needs to be dealt with by September. I'm just not sure if that's the fund that we should be using. We normally find out how much free cash we have in October. The Department of Revenue lets the town know. And I'm not sure if it's worth waiting till then so that we can pay this out of free cash, which wouldn't impact our bond rating. We usually normally get about $2 million, which would cover this. I'm hoping that tomorrow night we find out that we don't need as many trailers, which means that we don't need as much money. as a concerned parent and as a parent who has children in school, I understand your need and request to have it done immediately, and I feel strongly about that also. I just don't think the stabilization fund is the fund that we should be using. One of those funds, we only started in 2015. We try to put $200,000 a year into that fund to maintain it. This is for emergencies, and this may be an emergency. So I understand your concern. So it needs to be dealt with, obviously.
Well, I agree with, I'll get the hang of this. I agree with Kim and Tim's and Mr. Kieran's, thoughts on this. I do not agree with that they need 6 portables. I will be at the meeting, by the way. I also question, the idea of moving to pre-K over. Why do that when there's room at the high school for the immediate situation? Wait till later down the line where something more permanent can be done. I also think they need to start thinking about getting a building committee together in regards to building an addition, because it's not like the population is going to go down anytime soon. I also would like to see like a spreadsheet on how many kids are in each one of the grade levels, and what's the projected how many are coming in and moving out, to the middle school and or the high school, and do it for all 3 schools. So we have some data we can take a look at and see the trends. And I know it's been brought up, which would be kind of a short-term fix in regards to what's going to happen with the police trailers, and is that an option? It's time to think outside of the box. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
All right, thank you. The mic goes down to Peter. All right. Yes. Where is the meeting tomorrow night, and what time is the meeting?
That's my question.
What is it, Brett? DR Media Center at 6:30. Thank you, Brett. Oh, they moved it to the auditorium. We've been there, done that. Okay. At the auditorium at DR at 6:30 is the meeting with the school committee and the selectmen and concerned citizens. So, yes.
Now that we have a town administrator, what do you see as the role between the town administrator and the board of select persons? Is it general supervisory, or is it micromanagement?
What is the role between the town administrator and the board of selectmen? Is it supervising, micromanaging, or something in between? Okay. Peter?
I've never been a fan of micromanaging almost at any level. When I was with Marriott, my responsibility, along with every manager or anybody who was in management, was to develop anybody who worked for us. When it comes to the town administrator, I'm not sure what was legally written, but I have, my opinion would be that the town administrator has in her power to do whatever is necessary, and that the selectman would just be as a supervisory position, and supervisory only.
Yes, I also agree with that the Board of Selectmen, Board of Select Persons, which is a better name, will only be supervising the town administrator. As you've probably seen, and if you watch some of the selectmen's meetings, she was hired as our procurement officer. And right now, prior to her being hired, the town accountant was getting paid over $20,000 a year to do procurement. And there was a debate among the select persons
as to whether or not they should take that money away from the town accountant and give it, not give it to the town administrator, but let the town administrator be the procurement office. I'm not sure why that was even debatable. The town hired the town administrator as the procurement officer, and that was her duty and responsibility. And why would the taxpayers have to pay an additional $23,000 when it's already her job? I have not looked at her job description now, so if elected, if I'm fortunate enough to get elected, I will take a look at that. I strongly don't believe in micromanaging. I was the chief probation officer. I had 17 employees. I didn't micromanage them. I didn't watch them 24/7. You have to watch some stuff, and the board of select persons have to give some direction to the town administrator. But once she knows her job, and I've dealt with present town administrator Mallory many times, and she's a very good person. She's saved the town numerous chances of saving the town some money, and I am impressed with her. I think we need to let her do her job, and if I get elected, I'm not going to be micromanaging her, and if anybody else on the board tries to do that, I'm going to object to it, quite frankly. Thank you.
Well, I agree with the supervisory role, but I also look at, she's part of a team to look at what's in the best interest and find, like Ken mentioned or alluded to, the ideas of saving money with supplies, things like that. She coordinates with a lot of different departments, and she knows what's going on with each one of them. The Board of Selectmen, obviously, some have a full-time job, some do not. They don't have the time to do some of the day-to-day kind of hunting and looking for. They're busy studying up what issues they're working on or are coming before them. So Mallory, or the town administrator, fills a gap there, and to inform or communicate effectively with the Board of Selectmen. It needs to be a dialogue, an ongoing dialogue for this town to make the best use of all of the assets we have, and to create a better environment for all. Thank you.
In regards to the town administrator position, we at town meeting, it was probably over a 3-year process that we finally decided that we were going to hire a town administrator. I believe that, yes, she should be in a supervisory role. Her duties and responsibilities are written out by the Board of Selectmen, who oversee the town administrator. What her position is to make recommendations to the board on the subjects that come across and into the door at 979 Somerset Avenue. What she does is she makes sure and checks the different Massachusetts general laws to make sure that we're following these. I try to attend all department head meetings if I'm available in town, and she has been present, and her input has been fantastic to other boards and committees who do attend these department head meetings. Within the structure of those meetings, we just go around, it's just open forum, we go around the table and we talk about the different issues the different departments are having, and she may come out with a different idea of how to approach or to interact with that other department. Now, again, she does and is told by her job description that she's to take care of the day-to-day operations of the building. Regardless of who the members are that sit on that Board of Selectmen, we need to listen to what this young lady tells us to the best of our knowledge, do our own research, make sure that's correct so we can make an informed decision on what the town administrator is recommending. I say that all 3 Board of Selectmen should be involved in every topic across the board, regardless of what comes through that door at 979 Somerset Avenue. If I were to be elected, I would guarantee you that I would do as such. Because you have different individuals working on their own different ideas that get presented at town meeting. Now, if, say, Selectman A is working on a project and they say to me that, hey, do you have any extra time? Could you help me out? You know, I'd like to have a little bit of your input. I'll be more than happy to give that input.
Thank you. Okay. Brett?
As a selectman, do you think it's going to be more important to be flexible or principled, and why?
More important to be flexible or principled, and why? Okay.
Brett, you had promised not to ask any questions. Personally, I have to say it's more important to be principled, that there are certain ideals that I strongly believe in, and if I, for example, hear something said that's inappropriate, I would speak on that. If I think that some people aren't being treated fairly, I would speak on that. I understand the question of flexibility, but I'm not going to give up my views, my principles, my morals, or anything like that if I'm elected as selectman. I feel strongly about my ideas and what I live by. I've been around for a few years, you can tell by the gray hair, and I try not to deviate from my hardcore beliefs. I had two great parents that brought me up and taught me how to live properly, and I think if I was elected selectman, that principles are going to override being flexible. Thank you.
I look at principles, you know, your moral compass, whatever you want to call it, as being important. It's very important. You need to be ethical. I'm going to eat it for dinner. Anyway, I believe in telling the truth, not half-truth. I believe in, obviously, being accurate, but also in regards to the flexibility, sometimes you have to compromise, sometimes you have to bend a little bit, not your morals, not what's right or wrong, but in resolving situations that come to your doorstep, so to speak. And so you need to do that with an open mind and not be so inflexible that you can't see another person's point of view. You value everybody. Everybody has a point of view, and that's important.
I believe that you can be both flexible and principled. In regards to being principled, yes, we do have our own, as they say, preconceived notions on things, but you have to have an open mind and be able to think outside of the box, to be able to look at an issue and to look at the different parameters and what's involved with that, to be able to make an informed decision. Everything that comes across that desk is not going to be cut and dry. There may be some issues that are cut and dry that you can make just a very easy decision. But as we've heard this evening, there are many difficult decisions that this town is facing in the near future. So, yes, I am a very principled person. I do stand by my principles. I was raised in the right way, to be respectful, to be honest. But I do have a saying myself, I tell my friends this. I've always been bold, I've always been brash, but I'll tell you what, I'm very humble.
I was born into a very large family, and we were all brought up very strict. My father died when there was 10 of us at home, and my oldest brother was in the Vietnam War at the time. And you had to have morals in order to survive in that family. And there was no pulling one over on my mom. But I also feel like I'm serving on a member board with two other members, possibly 4 other members if future holds out. And who am I to just take my opinion and stand by that as just my opinion only, when the town, if elected, I'm representing some 7,000, 8,000 people. I'm there to represent them, and I have to be flexible with what they want, not just what I want. So I would say I would be leaning towards being more flexible than just standing on my morals.
Next question. Is there anyone that hasn't? You've asked questions already, so I'm going to pick someone that hasn't, and I'll get back to you. Over here.
understanding the town is a business that needs to be operated, and having heard all the very serious financial concerns we're facing with the need for industry to raise tax revenue and all of these other education issues that we're facing, what are your views on how we maintain the culture of this town, the history of this town, the open space needs of this town, the, you know, what brought people like me here when I chose it as a town, having not been raised here in Dighton?
Well, that's the same reason I chose Dighton, you know, was the open space. I had a farm in Washington State for a while, and here I am. I'm here. I had a farm in Washington State. I talk with my hands, and my last name's Piazza. Anyway, what I was going to say was we have commercial space that is underutilized. So rather than, I mean, obviously we need to control the growth of housing units, the population. That has a major impact. But if you look at what the wish list is for everybody sitting here, sewers and schools, and, you know, we have to prioritize, and there may have to be tough decisions made, but we do need to get more commercial, industrial, and also businesses that will definitely meet the needs. I mean, I know the South End could use a supermarket, maybe a smaller sized one than a Stop and Shop, but they need some type of food in that area, which would bring in tax dollars. So some retail, and that will take land, because obviously it can't be at the factory. Prince's House is underutilized. There's a lot of vacant spots in that. The plaza's not full. How do we attract business to the areas that we already have the brick and mortar building? And are there viable areas that can be used? I know we've got we brought a business in on William Street. It has yet to be built. A coffee shop, bakery. That's not going to provide enough revenue if you look at everything that's on the wish list. Thank you.
Yes, open space is a big issue in this town. I've served on the open space committee, and we've looked at some parcels in land in town that have been preserved. You know, we just preserved over 30 acres, almost 30 acres of property off of Elm Street and Milk Street. Part of it was done through community preservation funds. The other part of that was done and bought by the Conservation Commission. So in regards to open space, yes, we're trying to preserve open space as much as we can. It's just a question of the funds there and available to be utilized. Now, in regards to business again, I just want to say this, is that you look at back in the 1950s, 138 was the major road between Boston and Newport, Rhode Island. 24 gets built in the early 1950s. 138 becomes a ghost town. 44 is a major highway between Providence, Rhode Island, and Taunton, Massachusetts, or Cape Cod. What happens? Route 495 gets built. Dighton becomes a ghost town. Then again, because people are accessing our town as a bedroom community because they work in Boston, they cannot afford rents in Boston at $3,000 a month, so they come to the country where they can buy a home for $500,000, put $300,000 down, and the rest is history. Don't get me wrong, I believe in everyone has the right to home ownership, but the question is, can we control growth? Over 10 or 15 years ago, there was a proposed development that was going to be put off of Tremont Street and Chase Street, and then when the town of Dighton decided that, hey, you want to build 300 homes? You can only build 10 homes per year for 10 years or 30 years. And all of a sudden, that project, those people decided to go away from what I understood. So if we can try to control the housing starts in some way, it may be able to lessen the amount of children we have that makes our schools busting at the seams.
Sorry, is your question how do we keep the value, the culture that we have?
Yes.
When I first moved into town 35 years ago, it was just a town. And over time, I fell in love with it. And in the community that it is. But I think the answer is the people that make it the community, not a dollar value, not businesses, not anything but the people that you share your neighborhoods with. To maintain the culture that we have, again, it's the town hall that constantly looks for volunteers to do things around town. The town departments that we have. To me, the answer lies within all of those people, and the people who pay taxes, and the people who live in these buildings that we call homes, that make the culture of our town. Not a business, not anything else. Thank you.
I also like the culture of the town the way it is now. That's why I'm in favor of the right to farm that's coming before the town meeting on Wednesday. Closer. On Wednesday. Some of you may remember on Facebook a couple of years ago, and that person could be here for all I know, but somebody was concerned about a little bit of manure on the road. I stopped looking at it after 105 comments. We are a rural community, and I would like to preserve that. Now, when my house was built in 1776, it had 200 acres of land. It's not the same. I have less than an acre and a half. When I moved to town 30 years ago, I had 2 neighbors. I have 4 neighbors around me. The town has grown, and I'm okay with reasonable, smart growth. At the last town meeting we just had last week, I got up and supported the CPC funds for the 20 acres of land off of Elm Street. I think it's important that the townspeople know what your selectman is going to stand for. I stood for that. I was vocal about that, as well as my position on right to farm. I think that that's very important, that we need to let the people who are moving into town that we are right to farm community, and that you may smell some manure, but that's just the way it is. That's just the town. And we lived on off of Milk Street for 30 years, and every summer we could smell the cows, and we had horses ourselves too, so that our neighbors probably smelled the horses. But anyway, I would like to preserve it the way it is. It's not going to be like this, but any opportunity we get as townspeople to get some land, the water that's off of Main Street is a possibility. I believe it's 70 acres of land that we may be getting, which I think is important if the town can get that land, and it's proven to be no hazardous waste there. I think the town ought to make an effort to get that land if the ICI or Seneca is going to give it to us.
I think goes down to Tim. Are you next for the first question? Oh, no, yeah, no, it's, yeah. Okay. They stopped reminding. This gentleman with the baseball cap?
Yes, I'd like to know what kind of businesses you'd like to attract to the town of Dighton. Because we do need some more commercial development. What kind of businesses would you guys actually like to see?
What kind of businesses would you like to see come to Dighton? Tim?
I'm writing down my answers.
It's not an essay.
Don't start that time again. I'd like to see some commercial business come into town. Maybe we could get the Raytheon type building back again, but I just want to make this comment. The town of Dighton cannot go to 620 Spring Street and say, you must bring in X business. We just can't do that. We cannot do the same to the Princess House property. Businesses I'd like to see come into town would be possibly, say, a lawnmower shop, some type of bakery coffee shop, maybe another breakfast place, maybe another Giorgio somewhere else that we could eat in town. In regards to business, Dave, that's a real tough question. I really don't know how to answer that. Because then again, as I say, the land that is owned by homeowners in this town is on zone commercial property, and you can't go to someone and say, hey, look, you're going to build a Walgreens on a corner of 138 and Center Street. It's just not going to happen. So in regards to possibly the old former Zeneca property, across the street from my house on Main Street, it is still a hazardous waste site. For what my understanding is, it's being cleared up. A lot of the wells are testing positive, which means clean. That I hear this marijuana talk in town, maybe we can have a hemp farm in Dighton across the street from my house. It all depends on what the federal government is going to do in regards to the marijuana situation. But in regards to business, again, it's really a tough question.
Not that long ago, I read an article in one of the major newspapers about what they refer to as a walkable city. And an article was written by a gentleman who grew up in New York City, who never left his square block for the 60 some odd years that he had lived there, because everything that he needed was a drugstore, a food store, a restaurant, was all within that city block. And not that I want to become that city block, but I love the idea of being a walkable city, where you can actually just walk out of your house and find whatever that you need. Obviously, you can't do that in a rural city, a rural town that we're at, but I would like to see such things as that keeps us quaint the way we are, a bed and breakfast, like somebody was just saying, a bakery shop, a coffee shop. It doesn't have to be all major businesses that come through. Why can't they be a collection of smaller things, smaller industry, where maybe it's a small mom and pop drugstore like they have just opened up in Rehoboth a couple of years ago. Maybe things like that, as opposed to some big commercialized that changes the characteristics of our town.
Well, I would want clean businesses to come into town. That's why I'm supporting the medical marijuana overlay off of William Street. But we don't want something like Zeneca coming into town. When I first moved into town, ICI was here, and I remember talking to somebody being a little critical of the possibility of pollution, and this person got very defensive apparently at that time. A lot of people were working for ICI. The problem with that is that when you let some company like that pollute our environment, that land is not usable now unless it's cleaned up, and it's going to be the taxpayers that are going to have to clean that up. So I'm all in favor of getting clean business in here. People talked about a CVS. I'd love to see Daddy-O's open up again. I'm not sure if that's ever going to happen. But I am in favor of bringing business, but I wouldn't want something like ICI coming into town that could possibly pollute our land and waters.
Okay, did Vicki answer?
Oh, sorry, Vicki.
Obviously, I'm on the Development Industrial Commission. There was a poll kind of on Facebook, what do we want to see in town? And grocery store food was what the residents want. They want a pharmacy, a dry cleaners, a laundromat. And grant you, it has to be up to the property owners to decide what they want to do. And we can't necessarily dictate to them, but we can encourage them, for what is the best use of their property. And they may even be open to the idea of putting up a supermarket if we had a viable client that wanted the land. We also have, I've worked closely with Peter Merrigan at 620 Spring Street. And I've been in that factory many times, touring with people that were interested in potentially renting, including the marijuana people, for a grow site, not for a dispensary. And they couldn't come to terms. They were almost there, but they didn't make it. So now, obviously, we're looking at William Street. But there does need to be a grow site. Where can that be located? What's viable for that operation? Like I said, we do have a bakery, coffee shop, gourmet type, coming in on William Street. We need to, what business would be good in the plaza? Utilize the buildings we have. As far as industrial, I do believe that Interplast has plans for Princess House down the road. They haven't yet actually formally made a request to the town as to what they're going to do with their buildings. But there is talk of doing something.
lot of the same faces on boards in town over the years, and not a lot of new blood, considering all this new blood has moved into town. What would you do specifically to make these boards and committees friendly and not hostile, to have new blood come in and think outside the box?
So what would you do to get new blood in on these boards?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm not so sure what you mean by hostile. A lot of people shaking their head yes, so I guess they've had some bad experiences. I'm not sure what the answer is when it comes to getting more people to volunteer. It seems different from when I was growing up, where we seem to have all the time in the world, and today we have so many things that speed up our time, yet we still don't have enough time. I'm not sure everybody in town knows of all the positions that are open. I think the selectmen do a great job of getting the word out that there are open positions on these boards. But you're right, it does seem to be the same people, the same faces that you see on every board that's out there. It's just the core group of people that I think, again, love their community and want to help the community grow and prosper. As far as getting people to volunteer, I think it's just getting the word out more as much as you can, that there are spots available, and for people who want to be on those committees to help and join, because it does help everybody when you do have new faces and new blood serving on these communities. Committees.
I'm not sure what we can do to encourage people to join the different boards. I believe, Kathy, you just joined the Cannabis Task Force, and this is her first, is it your first committee?
Yes, it is.
We made her chairman of our first committee. So I'm on 4 committees, so, I'm interested in certain, like Historical Commission, Cemetery Commission, as well as Chris is, not my wife, but the other Chris over there. Historical Commission. 17 years ago, my father-in-law went before the Zoning Board of Appeals. I was a little disappointed in what happened when he went before the board, so I decided at that time I wanted to give something back. He had just passed away, and I joined the Zoning Board of Appeals. You learn a lot by joining these committees. You learn a lot about the townspeople, you learn a lot about the community that you live in. And as a result of that, I have joined other committees, and now I'm trying to join the Board of Selectmen. They do a very good job, as Peter has said, advertising different positions. As Peter also said, people are very busy. I joined my first board when my kids were already growing up, so it's easier to join. But if you have young kids, it's more difficult to join these boards. As Brett brings up at every selectmen's meeting, and Nancy does also, when these vacancies is brought to our attention. Not everybody watches the Board of Selectmen's meetings. I watch them occasionally. I don't watch them all the time. But that's really the only way. I mean, they also put it on Facebook. They also put it on our website, any committees that people want to join. But it really is difficult, I think, to get some people to join. But there are always committees that people can join. You want to participate in your government rather than sit back and make comments about people, the way the direction of the town. I think it's important if you join this committee to learn a little bit about what's going on in town, and you will benefit from that. So.
I was term limited on the planning and zoning board that I sat on, which was the way the state was. When I came here, I was amazed to find out how many people volunteer. So in talking to people, what I found is some people only want to do or can't join a regular commission that's going to meet on a regular basis. They enjoy volunteering 1 time or 2 times a year for various things like the annual town cleanup. You need to make it exciting to the people. I mean, I didn't know a whole lot about Dighton when I moved here, and I've sat back and I've spent a lot of years learning the aspects of the politics of this town. And finding the right committee for me. Nat Crane House, we've got a couple of members of that committee back there that they're working on, and Kathy, I recommended to Brett for the marijuana. But by knowing the individuals and what I invite them to try different committees. What do you feel like you want to do? It can be an intimidating process in this town, but eventually it's kind of like, if you've lived here long enough, you get to be more friendly with everybody. Thank you.
I'll just say this, I don't think a lot of people realize that there is nothing in the Massachusetts general law that states you must be qualified to serve on any board or committee or run for selectman or run for governor in the state of Massachusetts. I just think that what we should do is that if you have a prospective person who wants to serve on a board or committee, you ask them if they'd like to attend 2 or 3 meetings, get themselves antiquated what the committee's all about, see what the people do and how they interact with others inside that committee itself, to give them the opportunity. I will say this, is that things have changed recently with the town. They do what they do is short interview process, and I'll say this, I was interviewed briefly by the Zoning Board of Appeals chairman, and I enjoyed that interview. It was concise, it was to the point. The questions he asked were pertinent to what the possible position would be to serve on that committee. You don't have to be, I know people are intimidated when they're with a group of others. It's just that we need to just open up a little more so we can get more people to be involved. As I say, don't ask them to attend committee meetings or board meetings before they decide if they're going to be on the committee or not. It's, do we offer them coffee and donuts? I don't know, but the question is, do we need to compensate every board or committee in town? If we do, that just diminishes the amount of money that you have in the general fund, and some people would just go out to serve just because they want that extra $110 a month, whatever it may be. So it's just, I have had the honor and pleasure of serving on the CPC and the Park and Rec with some wonderful people that we have in this town. We have some great individuals who are chairmen of our boards, of our committees. They're run properly, but I don't know how the other avenue would be to open the door up.
Phyllis?
How do you feel about the board increasing to 5 members? Are you for it, or are you against it?
Is it my turn? Can I pass this? I honestly feel that it should remain 3. The Zoning Board of Appeals has 6 members, and I appreciate the contribution that they have at all the meetings and their input. We all listen to their views, and we're able to change our opinions. I just think the Board of Selectmen needs 3 people versus more people to make these important decisions. People complain about that it's 2 to 1 now. It'll be 3 to 2 if we get 5 people on. I would suggest if the binding warrant passes, and we're going to non-binding warrant passes, and becomes binding, that we consider what the pay would be, and perhaps reduce the salary that we're paying the 3 people right now. We reduce for the 5 people so that they get paid the $15,000 that we just voted on, that I supported at the last annual town meeting. So the salaries of the selectmen be reduced. If you're going to reduce their workload, which is already happened with taking the Board of Health away and getting a town administrator, and now we're going to have 5 select persons, I think the salaries ought to be reduced. But I feel pretty strong about that we should keep it at 3, and I think 3 can do the work for the town. I don't think we need 5 members.
I believe we only need 3 also. I don't think we're at the juncture where we need to jump to 5 yet. However, I look at what are the costs, what are the totality of the costs of having a 5-member board. We just hired a town administrator, and that's taken some of the work off the Board of Selectmen. So as far as an advantage, I feel like Ken said, if you got 2 against 1, you got 3 against two against, two, you're still going to have a split board, generally speaking. Sometimes they vote in unison. I was on a 7-member committee. It's still split. If somebody disagrees, it's always going to split. You have that much more time for discussion. You may have new ideas, but right now the public can come in and input ideas. There's no need at this point in time to go to 5.
As Mr. Pacheco said, it is a non-binding referendum that's been put forth in regards to possibly expand from 3 to 5. I am in favor of 3 to 5 because I sit and look to my right. There are 3 other individuals along with myself who are more than qualified to serve as a member of the Board of Selectmen. We're at 8,000 people. There are communities in Western Massachusetts that have 4,000 people or less and have 5-member boards of selectmen. I think it's about time we get out of the Stone Age, because in that way it would give the opportunity for more ideas to take place. As Mr. Pacheco said, yes, 3 is a majority of a 5-member board. So yes, you're going to have a 3-2 vote. You may have a 4-1 vote. You may have a tie vote where the chairman makes a tiebreaker vote. Just don't be put off by what's transpired in a nearby town with them having 5 members of the Board of Selectmen. They just, I think we have some very thoughtful individuals who would love to come out to serve on the Board of Selectmen if it were to be expanded. There are plenty of qualified people in town that can serve in a position as such.
I prefer a 5-member board for the simple reason that the more public input, the more public representation that there is, the better off the town would be. This is going to be the second time in just a matter of a few years that we have the 2-member board, and we have a what's our budget for this year? $16 million, $20 million, and we're just 2 members putting that budget together, along with the finance committee. And if something happens and we're down to 2 members again, it just plays havoc. So I would prefer a 5-member board, so that if 1 member does leave, we still have 4 members.
Woody?
A follow-up with that, there was 3 Board of Selectmen that have resigned in the past maybe 10 or 12 years. So that being said, there is a lot of pressure on being a selectman. And how do you plan on handling the pressure that it takes to take care of the town?
How are you going to handle the pressure that it takes to take care of our town?
Right, because there's a lot of complaints. You're on the Board of Selectmen, really, you're on the complaint board. You're saying you're going to get complaints from residents, you're going to get complaints from employees every day. How are you going to handle that?
Okay. Yep.
Like I said, I formed and was president of a neighborhood association that was the same size as Dighton. And you want to talk about complaints? You want to talk about people knocking on your doors? You want to talk about... We had a high level of organization in that neighborhood association. Like I said, it was the same size and the same amount of housing unit as Dighton. And I handled it just fine. And as far as what I see with Dighton, there's no difference. You look at 130,000 population, and you're coming before a board, and you have over 300 people coming to decide to argue with a commission, the planning commission. You're there till 3 o'clock in the morning, you just do your job.
Woody, that's a great question. I lived in a household that my father was a selectman briefly in town, okay, and that phone rang off the hook at my house. And there was never, ever a time on that telephone where I watched that man answer that phone in a disrespectful manner or talk to anyone disrespectfully. In regards to that, you must be as diplomatic as possible whenever you're dealing with anyone with the general public, because you're in a customer service position with, regardless of what way you want to look at it. So you must put on a brave face at all times. There must be, hello sir, how may I help you? Hi ma'am, what can I do for you today? And to try to work out those problems as best you can, and if you can't yourself take care of that problem and solve that problem, then you must look at your other colleagues to ask them for their advice to see if, if they have a different way of they'd like to handle that situation.
In my previous job, back when I was first entering the career force, I was responsible for an $8 billion budget. And if you want to talk about pressure, you were responsible for sales by the minute. That's what our computers told us. It wasn't even by the week or by the hour or what you did last year. And if you didn't react in time, you would quickly be phone called by Mr. Marriott himself to explain yourself. So as far as the pressure goes, I'm ready for it. Bring it on.
As I had mentioned earlier, I was a probation officer for 35 years, so I've had the opportunity to work with some very difficult people in the course of my job. And I'm not just talking about the judges, I'm talking about our clients. I've been threatened. I've had people come to my house. I've gone before the court and recommended committed time for people that are good for the community, and gone after they got their committed sentence. I go up to them and shake their hand and wish them luck in the future. So I have that ability to deal with people. When I was the chief probation officer, when there was a problem at the counter, I'd be the one that was called to the counter. My job was to calm the person down. I didn't excite the person. People go into court are nervous. They don't know what's going on, so they want to hear from somebody that's, they want the information as to why they're there. So I feel that I personally can deal with just about any situation. I don't think I've ever lost my cool, at least in front of people at the court. I've had some frustrations with some of the judges, but besides that, I can virtually work with anybody. I'm not a shy person. I'm willing to speak my mind. There are no bite marks on my tongue, so I don't bite my tongue too often. I do speak out, but I try to do it with some dignity and respect, and that's what I'm going to do for the people of this town. Thank you.
Yes, so follow-up to something that Lydia just asked, which I feel is a great question for how you'll handle your interactions with the public. However, I'm curious about what your working relationship has been with Selectman Goulart and Chairman Zagrafos professionally, and how well do you feel like you can, for lack of a better term, play in the sandbox with them? Going forward, so we do have some consistency on the board.
So you want to know how they all can get along in the sandbox. Okay. I like that. Okay.
Mrs. Zerzi, that's a great question. I'll say this, is that any interaction that I've had with Selectman Zagrafos or Selectman Goulart has been nothing but positive. I have a good working relationship with both. I have been in constant contact with them in different issues in the past, okay, and I've had a great working relationship. It's just, I've always been told and taught that it's a question of inflection, okay? It's how you come across to people. And I always try to present myself in a professional manner, and I've had nothing but a professional working relationship with both selectmen. For that matter, anyone within the confines of Town Hall and within that governmental system in town. So I've had nothing but a great experience.
Playing in the sandbox. At any one time when I was with the Marriott Corporation, I'd have up to 3,000 people that I was sharing the building with that you had to get along with. And there was many different personalities and people with different problems with their lives. And I know both Mr. Sarkopoulos and Mrs. Goulat, sorry, Mrs. Goulat. And they were appointed me to the Zoning Board of Appeals. They consistently appointed me to the Zoning Board of Appeals, and the only interaction that I ever had with them is if a problem came up, and it was to be brought to them to explain a budget situation or a situation with a customer, a guest in front of us, our taxpayers, however you want to refer to them as, who were not satisfied with the turnout from the board's decision.
So I think I can get along with both selectmen. I am a good friend of Brett, and normally 99% of the time I'm in agreement with what he said and what he does before the Board of Selectmen. I do have some disagreements with Selectman Goulart, and I verbally approached her on those and have expressed my concerns. My most recent concern is the evaluation on our town administrator. I thought that it was very unprofessional for her, the way she treated our town administrator that's only been there for 6 months. This is a person that she voted for to be our town administrator, that she agreed to the contract, even though she didn't participate in the initial negotiations. She had some input in the final negotiations, and she approved the evaluation that was used, and that was very critical of the evaluation form. So I'm not going to be shy about expressing my views. I think Brett addressed that correctly at that selectmen's meeting. I was at that selectmen's meeting. I didn't think it was appropriate for me to address it at that time, let the Board of Selectmen deal with it. But I felt very bad about it, well, the way our town administrator was treated, to be quite frank. I can still work with Nancy Goulart, and I expect to work with her if elected for the next couple of years. But like I said earlier, I won't be shy about my opinions. If I think something's not going correctly, as I stated earlier, I feel I'm a principled person. I will state my mind, and I will let the town know what my opinion is on that. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? We'll take 2 more. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I consult with people for a living, and I have for over 30 years. In working with Mr. Zagrafis, we have learned to agree to disagree at times. And with Nancy, I've been working with her on some issues that mainly the medical marijuana. We have great respect for each other in communication. While I may not agree with everything either one does, they have their reasons for what they do that. Okay?
Okay. It's getting later, so we're going to do 3 more questions. We have Bob, what was your name? Glenn, and Chris, right? Okay. Bob?
Would you be willing to offer tax incentives to attract businesses?
Would you? Who answered the last one?
So we'll
I get confused. Peter started, you?
So you started.
You can. Peter goes? Oh, I'm so glad my audience is keeping track. Okay, tax incentives for businesses, correct? Okay.
I'm not a huge fan of offering tax incentives to businesses that can pay their fair share of taxes. But in this case here, where we're a small town and we are trying to attract, I believe, small businesses, it's probably the best alternative that we have to no businesses at all.
I think you have to look at each individual business that's coming into town, whether or not we're going to give them a tax incentive, because when we reduce their taxes, it's the rest of the people that are going to be paying those taxes. So I think we have to be very conscious about that, see what the benefit is to the town, see if their plans on being here for a long time. I'm not necessarily opposed to tax incentives, but I think in each individual case has to be taken into consideration. And the Board of Selectmen has just formed a committee, or in the process of forming a committee, to deal with tax incentives when businesses come in, so they can take a look at that. So I'd be encouraging that board to continue doing their work.
The Development Industrial Commission appointed one of our members to the TIP committee, or recommended that they consider one of our members for the, but we voted on it. While that's somewhat of a minimal way, because certain businesses are not going to qualify. It's going to, you know, and it has to be handled in the right way. I'm not even sure if they keep changing the state law in regards to that, if I remember correctly. And have they come to total resolution on what the policy and procedures are for towns? Thank you.
I know that from experience, the town of Dighton has signed a few TIF agreements in the past. I'll give you an example. Behind us is the power plant. And in regards to that agreement, they had agreed to hire X amount of qualified people who lived in the town of Dighton. Well, I don't think they hired one. And they may have one individual who worked there, and that was not part of the original agreement. We've shortchanged ourselves in a lot of these TIF agreements. You have multi-million-dollar corporations that are moving into this town, and they want a tax break. Yes, it is great to give someone an incentive to hire qualified employees or town residents, but we have to hold their feet to the fire. We just had a TIF agreement with Aquaria Water down the street. We didn't even ask them to tie into our own water system if our water system goes down. That should have been part of that TIF agreement. You know, TIF agreements can be a negative downward spiral to towns like ours. I only believe that TIF agreements should be signed in large cities like the city of Boston and not in small communities like the town of Dighton. That's my view.
Okay. Glenn?
Yeah, so I'm sure everyone knows that, you know, in the past few years, we've made news for different things that have gone on. And recently, last week, you know, there was the article where, you know, one of our police chief got fined for, you know, previous boards of selectmen members, or ultimately the hiring board of the, you know, town employees. I'm just curious what you guys feel as, you know, would you guys take ownership or responsibility as a hiring board? And that seemed to, the article I read in the paper tried to make it sound like it was the fault of, you know, the department head. I'm just curious, you know, as you guys view that whole situation.
So is your question about the hiring?
No, the news, I'm sure everyone read the article. I'm just curious that situation, because again, it's another Dighton in the news for what the hell's going on.
Okay.
So, is this in regard to the police chief? The article that was in the paper? Yes. I read the article. I was at the selectmen's meeting when the president of Board of Selectmen spoke about that. I do think it needed to be addressed by the board, and they should have made comments about that, how they felt it was inappropriate behavior that the police chief did at that time. I happen to like the police chief, but I do think that you have to do everything properly, and it sounds like the two people that were hired, at least the one, his son, wasn't hired properly, didn't go through the proper process for being hired, interviews and stuff like that. This is from what I read. I don't have any extra information. So I think the Board of Selectmen now, I think they may have alluded to a letter of reprimand, but I don't know for a fact whether that may not be public information. They may have alluded to that in the article, but there should have been something said, and he should have been informed that the Board of Selectmen were not pleased with that, and it can't be tolerated again by any department head.
I read the article also, and it's a shame to watch our town go through these trials that we've had over the years in the court of public opinion. While I believe that the moral and ethical duty is to inform our residents, which brings me to kind of another subject in regards to communications within this town. I wish the Gazette was more involved in the town. I don't feel like sometimes communications are, it's being in print, the information that the town has. We've had a little newsletter quarterly that was been handed out to inform people. But going back to the chief, they go into closed session and to whatever the board decides of selectmen. It shouldn't always be, yes, we should be informed about it, but we don't need all the details as to what appropriate actions unless they should be public knowledge.
I'll just say this, in regards to people in positions who would like to have a family member possibly hired, it's a slippery slope that you approach with that. In regards to the chief himself, the chief is the appointing authority who makes the appointment to the Board of Selectmen. In that case, there should have been a backup plan where the chief should have recused himself, let the three sergeants make the recommendation to the Board of Selectmen to make that appointment, where that situation did not happen. There should have been a backup in place, because years ago, the lieutenant would make the recommendation to the chief, who would in turn make the recommendation for appointments to the Board of Selectmen. Since we only have sergeants as officers in charge on a shift without an immediate supervisor as being a lieutenant, because the town just didn't want to replace that person or that individual in that position, that's where we have fallen into that problem where the chief basically should have recused himself in that case, let the sergeants make the recommendation to the board, but they could not because that plan is not in place.
Glenn, is your question, are we willing to take ownership of our decisions?
Yeah, it's more around, like, it's what you're saying, like, because ultimately, they said, you know, selected, ultimately, you make the hiring.
Right. As a selectman, if I'm elected, I would, even in my personal life, for whatever decision I make, I stand behind it 100%. Sometimes I'm proven wrong, and I'm willing to change my position, but whatever decision I make from with a lot of thought and energy that's involved, and I'm certainly willing to stand by that decision.
Okay. The last question for tonight?
Can we change the minimum lot size, and should we?
Can we change the
And
minimum
what should we
lot
change it to
size,
if we
and
do?
should we?
We can change the minimum lot size. Should we? I believe there are certain areas where it may be appropriate. Certain areas it may not be. I would also like under consideration that senior housing, little homes for seniors, and in that case, you know, like a two-bedroom on a single story on their own lot. In that case, you'd have to look at smaller lot sizes depending on how you did it. Because our seniors do need housing. They don't need to be in a two-story mega mansion. So I would agree with you that you could look at larger or smaller lot sizes, but it needs to be done on a case-by-case basis.
Bruce, that's a great question, Mr. Chardonnay. In regards to that, I know that the planning board's been very proactive over the last few years of putting together, you know, retreat lots or conservation subdivisions and such. In regards to postage stamp size lots and reducing that, I'd like to challenge you to take a ride up, which you probably already had, the Dighton Circle, and look at some of the sizes of the postage stamp lots that are in there. I really wouldn't want to live that close. If you were to do that, it would take away from the rural character of the town itself, because then you'd have congestive growth. And I really don't think that we want to go that route right now. I like the lot sizes the way they are. They've been in place for quite a few years. And again, it keeps our rural character by having, you know, home ownership on 5,600 square feet, I believe it is, for a lot, and it may be higher. Tom can tell me, I'm not sure off the top of my head. I may be misquoting the number, about 7,500 square feet. So in a reduction, I don't think that would be beneficial to the town.
Can it be changed? Yes, there's two mechanisms for changing that lot size. It's the planning board and the zoning board of appeals. If somebody has a lot right now it's the planning board that determines what our lot sizes are going to be. If somebody has a lot size that's not an appropriate size buildable lot, that's what they have the zoning board of appeals for, to seek relief from the zoning board of that lot size. So should they be changed? It's probably time to look at it. But if we want to maintain the quality of our lives in our neighborhoods, it's probably only appropriate for certain lots. We only have maybe 600 to 700 buildable lots left in town, with the exception of subdivisions for 40Bs. So at this point, I'm not so sure that looking at lot sizes and changing them would be an appropriate time.
Yeah, so it can be changed. It'd be a bylaw change, and that would be the voters of the town to approve that. I think we got it just about right. It's 3/4 of an acre. I wouldn't want to see it any less. I wouldn't want to see it any more. Right now, you have to have 175 feet of frontage if you got water or sewage, or if you don't have either one, it's 250 feet of frontage. So we have some control over, the town has some control as the lots. If you want to have a smaller, if you have a smaller lot or smaller frontage, you go before the zoning board of appeals, and we hear these cases all the time, and we make a determination whether or not it's an appropriate change. We had, for an example, we had a couple of house lots on Main Street that were, each lot was 135 feet, but after some time they become married. This was a veteran, this was his retirement, and he was taxed separately at 135 feet each. We approved that division of that land. The market decided that he could only sell one lot, and the other lot was never sold, so we basically got what we want. But people come before, taxpayers come before the zoning board of appeals to ask for variances, and we look at it favorably sometimes and not so favorably other times. I think we got it right. When we got our bylaws back in 1969, it was 3/4 of an acre, and it's remained the same, I believe. So I think we shouldn't change it.
Okay, great. I would like to thank all of our candidates for being here tonight. It was an interesting evening. Good luck to all of you. And I would like to thank the audience. I think we had some good questions, and I learned some things about the candidates tonight, and I hope you did too. So thank you so much for coming.